most of you know, I think, had an operation this week, so I'm covering for them. Red White Valve is a 40-year-old company located in Irvine, California. We're owned by a VIR corporation out of Italy. We were bought in 2003. Prior to that, we were owned by Mitsui Corporation. We have primarily 9 stocking locations, warehouses. This will come up in a minute. 9 stocking locations, including a DC in the Pittsburgh area, just on the Ohio-Pennsylvania border. And we have about nearly $1 million in inventory in that location. So any of your customers that need something quick, you guys need it quick, we can typically get it out of there. In Irvine, we stock quite a bit of inventory, and we do some actuation on butterfly valves and ball valves. We can put actuators up to 24-inch on butterfly valves. We have 3 regional managers. I'm kind of giving you an overview because I know Joe gave a presentation last year, so I don't want to bore you with all that stuff. We also have a new division that we've set up. It's our hydronics division that's selling our balancing valves. In Europe, we've been selling balancing valves for about 15 years, and we've now taken that responsibility on in the U.S. here in North America. And we've done pretty well. We've actually exceeded our plans this past year, probably by, grew about 60%. So we did pretty well on the hydronic side on the balancing valves. It's price competitive on the balancing valves. We have lead-free balancing valves. And again, we probably have in the plumbing market in California, we have about an 80% market share. So that 80% market share means that we've been involved in lead-free activity for quite a while now. I'm on a committee that comes from our industry that has interfaced with the EPA on the lead-free requirements, the national requirements that came into play this year. And we've been interfacing with the EPA now for about 3 years in preparation for this. And of course, having been in California with the AB 1953 requirements, we're pretty familiar with it. There's about 8 of us on this committee. And so I thought a little bit, what I might do is talk to you a little bit about the lead-free stuff and then get into the products. And that way you guys, if you have any questions on that, which you should, I mean, it's a difficult law to get your hands around. And there's a lot of misconceptions, and you can read a lot of information out there, and some of it is accurate, some of it is just very difficult to read. So with that, I'll talk a little bit about the California, the 1953 requirements, and you can blame us Californians. I mean, I grew up there, gone to USC, all that kind of stuff, so you can blame us for all of these weird laws and shit that happens in the US, and it's probably accurate. So the AB 1953 sponsored the national law that came into play this year. And that AB 1953 requirements were actually, and are actually more stringent than the national requirements, primarily because it requires wording on the valve. It has to have labels and things where the EPA requirement does not require labels. So there's nothing in the EPA law, the national law, that says the valve has to say LF on it, or it has to have anything that says lead-free on it, which is really strange. I mean, because you'd think you'd want that on there, but the California law does require that. And by the way, there's a number of states that also require that same requirement. The California code has changed. Everyone knows that it's AB 1953, but it changed. And this was part of a presentation I made to the ASA, so there may be some things in here that are either redundant or may not apply to y'all. But I made this presentation to the group of ASA, the National Convention, a while back, a couple months back. NSF 61G, if you've heard that term, there's a whole, NSF is an independent laboratory, just to be clear. CSA is an independent laboratory. There's a number of the, IAPMO is an independent laboratory. All these are companies that certify products. It just so happens that NSF built this law, but anyone can, any independent laboratory can certify to that law. Okay, so it does not have to be NSF that does the certification. It could be CSA, it could be Truesdale Laboratories. It has to be a recognized laboratory, what's called ASME recognized laboratory. So NSF 61G was the national law that had the 0.25% of lead in the waterway. And what that means is you got your waterway in a valve or in a faucet, and 0.25% of the material content in there can be leaded. Only 0.25%. And what they do is they take the weighted average and they actually test for the lead content in that weighted average. Anyway, NSF 61G will be replaced by NSF 372. So you'll start seeing that term more and more, NSF 372. And all of these requirements are certified by third-party laboratories. And by the way, if you want our certifications, you can go on our website and you can download the certifications. They're on the website, and it's actually from the laboratory. And those laboratories, be it us or NIMCO or Combraco or somebody that will compete with us, that has to be listed on that laboratory's website as well. So if there's any questions ever on that, you can go to that laboratory's website, NSF or IATMO or somebody like that, and get that information. The national law does mirror California's law. The only strange part of that, again, is that it does not have to have a labeling on the valve that says lead-free, although I think probably 90% of the people that are making valves or faucets or anything will have that wording on it that will say lead-free. There's a lot of lack of clarity in the law, and a lot of that will get resolved over the next couple of years because of lawsuits. I get asked all the time, and I've got a little note in here for y'all, is, you know, who's gonna support this? Who's gonna find out on this? And for instance, I was at a WIC meeting, and one of the guys, a smaller distributor up in Michigan, said, well, we're just not gonna do it. He says, our inspector, our local inspector said, he's not gonna support it. And I said, well, so when you drive down the freeway and it says 65 miles an hour, you say, I'm not gonna support that. I mean, you're gonna get a ticket. So, I mean, it's naivety to believe that that you will not get caught on this stuff. And what's going to happen in California? We've already had 2 lawsuits, both of them against Home Depot, because the deeper the pockets, the more likely the lawsuit will be. So there's already been 2 lawsuits on not selling certified valves through 2 Home Depot stores, actually in Northern California. So it's going to be third-party policing, if you will, attorneys that are going to look for billable hours. They're going to sue distributors, manufacturers, and maybe even some plumbers. So you're going to see this happen because it's going to be a way to make some money for these attorneys. EPA is driving the law. Do we have a clicker? Yeah, page down. Another misnomer on this law is a lot of people believe it's the 2-inch. That's not accurate. The law actually says potable drinking water. There's no stipulation on size. The only stipulation on size, and this is where the misconception comes from, there's a stipulation on size of 2-inch and larger inline gate valves. Now, I was in 2009, I went to a meeting in Sacramento when the AB 1953 was coming out, and we asked the attorneys that wrote this law, why 2-inch and larger gate valves? And they did not have a good answer. So our only, I guess, presumption was that the cities that sponsored the attorneys to write this law all had 2-inch and larger gate valves down at the water level and did not want to replace all those gate valves. That's the only presumption that we had. But it's 2-inch and larger gate valves, but everything else has to be lead-free. Doesn't matter if it's 4-inch, 6-inch, or anything else. Anything containing lead must be certified as lead-free. By the way, you can sell, and we plan to keep selling lead-free products or leaded products going forward. And you can sell those even if you have it left in your inventory. Just label those not for potable water, not for drinking water. So you can continue to sell it because there's a lot of applications that do not require potable water. All right. Another question I get asked a lot, are prices coming down? Because when we first introduced our products at least, and most of the other companies, there was about anywhere from a 20 to a 40% price increase on leaded products when we introduced the lead-free items. Ours went up about 25%. By the way, we took back all of our inventory, at least in California, and that was, you're talking about a nightmare. But now, of course, no one's taking inventory back. It's leaded. Another misconception is hose bibs are included in the law. There's, in California, they excluded hose bibs. And so there's a perception that hose bibs are excluded. They are not excluded from the law. The potential to use a hose bib in a potable water application exists. So you see the construction trucks, and they have the yellow containers of water. They fill those typically from a hose bib. Now, mind you, a hose probably has more lead than the hose bib itself. But still, that's, you know, who's going to figure this stuff out except for attorneys. On the pricing, we've seen it come down. We've seen a number of things occur where the Chinese are now catching up on the lead-free, and we're producing products in China that are lead-free in our plants. We have 2 plants in China that we own outright, and we're producing the lead-free products there, as well as the lead-free products in our Italy operations, in our Thailand operation. So yeah, the prices are coming down. One of the things that drove the pricing so high up is when you manufacture a valve or a faucet or anything, when you're cutting metal, you have scrap. And historically, that scrap material is resold, and that reduces your costs. Well, on the lead-free stuff, we could not resell the scrap. We actually had to basically toss it away. So that increased the cost of our product. The other thing that increases the cost of your product, especially on valves, is that your yield rates are lower. And I don't mean to bore you on this stuff, but it's a little bit interesting because people will ask, why do I have to pay more money? And meaning on the yield rates, when you machine a product, what lead adds is lubricity. So lead adds lubricity to the machining process. So when you machine a valve, you have to machine it slower on the lead-free items because there's no lead in there, because it work hardens. And by taking the lead out, we get a lower yield rate. So instead of making 1,000 valves a day, we're now making 800 valves a day because we're running the machine slower. Okay? That's another thing that increases your costs. Enforcement, again, I talked a little bit about the attorneys. Like I said, we've already seen 2 lawsuits. We're still involved, Red White is, in 4, I think it's 4, might be 5, asbestos lawsuits. And we haven't sold asbestos since 1978. That's when we stopped making asbestos products, basically filaments. But we're still involved with it because if you can make money off of billable hours, you're going to do it as an attorney. Hope there's no attorneys in here. We just went through a lawsuit last week with, actually, with Uponor Corporation in Las Vegas because some valves were failing. I think that's enough of that. Okay, another question I get asked about is what is the material differences that are out there? There's essentially 3 types of materials. When you pull a lead out of brass, you've got to replace it with something. You've got to put something back in there. And one of the materials is what's called Eco-Brass. You've seen the name maybe out there. And what they've done is they've taken silicone, which is glass or sand, and replaced the lead with that silicone back into the brass. The problem with that is you've got to get special solder and flux for that material. And most of the contractors, at least the ones in California, essentially pushed out those people that were selling silicone-based lead-free materials because they did not want to go buy higher cost flux or solder on the sweat valves. It's not as good with temperature. You have to heat the valve up quite a bit, and of course on a ball valve, for instance, you've got a soft seat or a plastic seat, and the hotter you get that valve, the more likely you are to damage that seat. There's also a bismuth material, It's got good solder performance, but it's very high temperature sensitive. Bismuth is also a material, and you're going to have to catch this one, that the state of California is looking at right now as outlawing bismuth. So if it starts going there, then it's going to spread somewhere else. But bismuth is also a known carcinogen in its raw form. And then there's, and this is the material we use, and of course we're going to say it's better, but what's called binary brass. And what that is when you pull the lead out of the material, we add back in more copper and a little more zinc. So you pull the lead out, you put more copper and zinc in there. So you'll see the copper content of that material a little higher. No special solder or flux, and the machining capability is much better for us also. Any questions on materials while we're on it? Just on our products, and I figured we'd talk a little more in the individual group meetings on the actual products, and if you have any questions on those. But what we've done is we've taken our existing valve range and we simply added an AB suffix to the part number. So, and again, we started this again in California, and we're not aware at the time the national law was going to take effect. There was a lot of resistance to the national law in 2009. So we put that AB suffix on all of our valves, all of those part numbers, and again, we have a large market share there. And so anything you see with an AB suffix has been certified as lead-free with red, white valve. And what we've done is we know that the market is good, better, best. There's a guy that wants only the best. He's typically a repair plumber. And there's a guy that wants a valve that just doesn't melt in the sun. And so we've tried to do all of that by doing a good, better, best. And the pricing is roughly 20 to 25% difference between the best and the next on the ball valves. We make ball valves through 10-inch, and we make butterfly valves and stock butterfly valves through 24-inch. So we have 24-inch valves in stock in California. We do not have those at the DC because they just don't move enough. We've got a full line. I know gate globe and check valves don't sell like they used to, but we do have a full line of gate globe and check valves. And above 2-inch, we still sell a lot of lead-free gate valves, even though the law says 2-inch and larger are excluded. We still sell quite a few, because most of our distributors, just to let you know, in California, the larger distributors, I'd say 90% of the distributors did not carry two lines of leaded and lead-free products. They just simply said, you know what, that's too much to worry about. We're just going to go lead-free and not concern ourselves with having two different SKUs of the same type of product. We have a full line, as I mentioned earlier, of lead-free balancing valves. We go through 2-inch on the balancing valves that are lead-free. We make balancing valves through 12-inch. And we have a good, better, best theory on the balancing valves as well. We can talk a little bit more about it when we sit down there. But what we have what's called the circuit setter type or Bell and Gossett type that is very price competitive. That valve out of our Chinese plant, by the way, is lead-free standard. We then have the static balancing valve through 2-inch. That static balancing valve has an option for lead-free and is also leaded in its standard form. And then we have the automatic balancing valve, which is very popular. We've got some new products out. We've got the new PEX. Actually, we've had the PEX valves out now for probably a year on the lead-free. But we've just introduced the F1960, which is the Uponor reversible style connection. So that is in our price list as well, our new price list. We've gotten a lot of feedback on that, mostly because of the price must be too low, because a lot of people are trying to order it. So we do have a full line of PEX valves. We will take that PEX valve line through 2-inch in about 2 months here. We'll have the inventory. Right now it's through 1-inch. We have the XLC valve, which is your press valve technology. We've had the lead-free through 2-inch for about 4 years now, and the XLC will be here next week. So the XLC style is on a boat and in a container coming to us next week from Italy. So, and by the way, Italy qualifies as the most favored nation, which qualifies it as in most of your Made in America requirements. So the XLC will be here. By the way, going forward, all of the XLC valves, we will not make a leaded XLC, nor an XL above 2 inch. So we'll only make the leaded, the low lead version, okay? By the way, I use the term low lead and lead free, and you'll hear that term, people kind of go, is it lead free or is it low lead? The law is that it's 0.25%, so it's really got lead in it. So it's low lead, but we call it, everybody refers to it as lead free, so it's synonymous, I guess. We also have a strainer, a full line of strainers. We have a strainer in the price list now, but it does not have a steam rating. The new strainers will have a steam rating. Those are coming out of China, out of our China plant, and those will be here in about a month. So we'll have those on board also. And as I mentioned, we'll continue to sell the products for non-potable applications. We sell a lot of irrigation valves, and we sell a lot of valves to HVAC applications. And those people don't want to pay for the potable water valve or lead-free valve. All right. I think that's it for overhead, yeah. That's pretty much it for my presentation. I wanted to be fast, and I figured you guys would be bored by the time I got up here and be bored with me, so I wanted to be pretty fast on it and talk about it, and then talk about the products when we sit down together over here. Any questions on lead-free or about products in general or the market, any of that?
Do you have a majority of that stuff in the Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indies?
Yeah, we have, the only thing we just sent the 1960, the F1960, the PEX Uponor style valve to them. So that's probably about another week before it gets there. It takes roughly 5 days shipping to the East Coast from California. That's why we're trying to build up that inventory. Frankly, Red White's never been strong in this general area in Pennsylvania, Maryland, that kind of area down through there. We've always been strong in New England, and we're strong in the Midwest and down in Texas. But for whatever reason, we didn't have good reps like Yates that we have today, and we just haven't grown that business in those parts of the world. Out west, we're the dominant player, but here it's been a struggle. But so that's why we built up that DC there in Pittsburgh, and it's quite a bit of inventory, just so we can circumvent the 5 or 6 days it takes from California.
Did you say you have ball valves up to 10 inch now? Is that like the 1500
Yeah, it's
series?
flanged. It's flanged.
Like the 5800 series?
Yeah.
I thought you only made those to like 6. Is that
No, we now have them to 10.
Okay.
Yeah, it's competes with the American Valve
Yeah,
4000 series, and it's a little bit cheaper, and frankly, we're a little easier to deal with than American Valve is.
Yeah, because I think I just had a quote I had to do for some 8 inch, and they didn't want to mix and match, but in your price book, I think it only went to 6. So
That's true.
I told you didn't have them. And,
Yeah, well, we didn't have them.
Okay.
You're right in doing that. We've just, it takes a while, you just don't sell those larger sizes. And when you get in, I worked for a company called Jamesbury for a number of years, and I ran Crane Valve for a number of years. And you get into those larger sizes, typically carbon and stainless steel. And so, most of that stuff, when you get into iron, people, they're replacing a gate valve, basically. You're replacing an iron gate valve with a ball valve. Your affluent plants, your sewage treatment plants and stuff. But you just don't sell that many in the larger sizes. Even when I was with Jamesbury, we didn't sell a whole lot. You actuate. And our valve's a lot easier to actuate, by the way, than the 4000 series. 4000 series, there's a term called ISO 5211. So your butterfly valves have that mounting bracket, and you can mount an actuator straight on top of a butterfly valve, like ours will be ISO 5211. That's your configuration on the top mounting, which will interface with an actuator, a fairly common actuator, go right on a butterfly valve. Well, our ball valves has that same ISO 5211 mounting bracket, so you can direct mount, and it's a lot cheaper to do that, to actuate the valve.
Any talk of a ductile iron or stainless to compete with their ball valves, the 4000?
Well, we have the 5800 series.
Right, cast iron.
Yeah, so you want to, we actually are going to ductile on our flanged balancing valve. And we have a joint venture in Poland, of all places, and that joint venture will probably produce ductile iron for us and potentially for the 5800 series. But at this time, I'd say we're probably at least 6 months to a year away from having that. I think what's that, 4000D that American has? That and people, the cost difference is probably 5% between a ductile and a regular iron valve. And the primary difference is you heat treat one and control the pouring, so a little bit tighter. But the material's pretty close to the same. But it'll probably be 6 months to a year before we can get that done on the 5800, because we spent a lot of money and time on the balancing valve, the flange balancing valve, and that will become a ductile product because there's a big market for that. Anything else? Any valve questions in general? I got way too much knowledge on valves. I was single for a lot of years. I was a kiss of death, you know. I was an engineer, undergraduate engineer, and worked for valve companies. So you go to a party and you meet a girl and they go, oh shit, an engineer and a guy who works for a valve company. You know, you just couldn't meet one. So, so anyway, I've got way too much knowledge on valves. Anything else?
Other questions, guys?
Just as a reminder, you know, we had made the decision pretty much at this time last year that red white was going to be our lead-free valve of choice. Obviously, they've been doing it for a while. It's going to make it easier for our inside salespeople and you to just know that if you need lead-free, that's who we go to. We have now the threaded and the solder ball valves on the shelves. We have the threaded and the solder check valves on the shelves. We now have we switched to their press valves all the way, 1/2 through 4 inch. And as soon as the XLCs, the ones that we have 1/2 through 2 are lead free. And as soon as the XLCs are available, we'll switch them too. We still have a couple of leaded ones of those, but we also have a couple of hose bibs and maybe a couple other things, but never had an issue. Inventory's been good, and I think we've been getting positive feedback from people that have used the valve, so I think it's a good opportunity for us to be able to grow that business with a real quality product. And so just remember that if you need lead free, and even for other projects, when you're bidding, you know, we've gone in for some different projects where there was a lot of butterfly valves involved. Their prices are really good on the butterfly valves too. So definitely want to set some opportunities up with these guys and look for ways to use their valves.
I know you touched on this business, so what are some of the problems, some of the guys you've seen out there with those two additives rather than your additive out in the field? And there's solder some issues, but is there?
Yeah, when NIPCO shared the California market with us for the most part, Watts was a small player, and so I'll just talk openly about those competitors a little bit. NIPCO has no position in the California market, to give you an idea, because they came out with the EcoBrass. And again, the contractor said, I don't want to buy the special solder. I don't want to buy the special flux. They were having a lot of failures on the valve because the silicone, you just keep sweating it on, and eventually the one thing that kills a ball valve is heat, and you hit that plastic seat. That plastic seat starts gassing at about 300 degrees. So it doesn't take long for a torch to hit that valve, and of course half the people don't know how to sweat a valve, and I wouldn't know how to sweat a valve in either, by the way. But they'll point the torch toward the middle of the valve instead of away from it, that kind of thing. And so they're having a lot of failures with seat leakage, and on top of that, we also replaced all of the ProFlow valves for Ferguson out there. Because what happens is, again, back to the machining process, if you machine these too quick, they'll work hard, and stainless steel work hardens too, so it's a lot like stainless. And you'll hear the term that the lead-free valves are more brittle, and that's absolutely true. The tensile on a lead-free valve is much higher. So when you start machining, the tensile goes up. And so when that tensile goes up, you have more of a chance, especially when you thread in a valve. So if you thread in a valve, there's a lot of energy expelled when you put in a nipple into a threading area, because you're basically, and all of our contractors, the tighter the better, right? And of course they'll wrap Teflon tape around it, and they'll start threading that in, and they'll go all the way as far as they can go. But that's a lot of energy expelled onto those threads, and that's a lot of pressure on those threads. And so what you see in a lot of valves, and it's even happened to a couple of ours because they just went crazy with the threading, is they'll pop. You know, the threads will just pop because that, you know, in NPT threads, it's tapered, right? So you got like a cone going into that, and as that taper goes in, it's getting wider and wider, and so the energy is getting higher and higher on that, and pretty soon there's so much energy expelled on that, something's got to happen. It's kind of like an earthquake, right? Something's got to give, and eventually that pops. And so they have a number of problems on the ProFlow valve. They were buying those from a source that was trying to produce them and then machining them too quick, and it just did not work for them. So that was with the silicone was popping. On the bismuth, they've had problems mostly because they just have to use quite a bit of gas, and they didn't like that. And another thing that's come about too is that we're seeing on the press stuff is in California now you cannot bring gas in at any time on a school ground, on either a campus, a hospital, or any kind of school. And I think that you'll start seeing that across the country because it makes sense. That one makes sense. I mean, a lot of the California shit is like nuts, you know. But that one probably makes sense because you shouldn't be bringing that onto a school ground, and it's against the law in California. And I think that's probably something that's going to happen elsewhere also, because that's one of the ones that actually makes sense. So you're going to see, I think, more and more press technology. Another thing, by the way, these are all these California things, right? In January, a new law went into effect in California that requires home builders to, one of the things that on tankless water heaters, one of the things that has always stopped tankless water heaters from growing more and more than they are is the installation, right? It costs so much for the fluting and so much for that. So now all of the home builders in California must build their house with the fluting already installed for a tankless water heater and a standard water heater. So that fluting has to be in any new home as of January the 1st. Has to be set up for a tankless water heater as well as a water heater, a tanked water heater, standard water heater. Yeah, that's one that's what? But anyway. So I think what that will do is actually prosper more sales of tankless water heaters, of course. And I'm sure that the tankless water heater people will spend a lot of money. We don't sell any tankless water heaters. We sell a lot of tankless water heater kits, but that's probably one that I'm sure that they lobbied like crazy for this stuff. I'm on an ASA lobbying committee, so I'm familiar with all the lobbying that goes on, and it's almost comedy, you know, some of the stuff that gets done. Anything else? Any questions? Okay, thanks you guys.
Thank you. Okay, we are set to take a break from 10 to 10:30, so check your emails, phone calls, everything, and get back at it at 10:30.